Other people's stuff is trash. If you don't like it, get out. Mike, my husband, sneered with a face lit by the flames. Burning in front of him were children's toys and clothes. They were keepsakes of my son. Mike was burning these precious memories of mine in the backyard, almost as if to flaunt them before me. The emotions welling up in my heart. Anger and hatred. I will not forgive him. Mike, who hurt Henry and mocked his death. And Jane, who stole precious time from Henry. I will have my revenge. I don't care what happens anymore. Without anything left to protect, I am invincible. I will bring those two down to hell, betting everything I have. Telling me to get out of the house? That was my plan from the start. Sure, I replied with a beaming smile. It was about 2 weeks after Henry's passing. I received a call from Mike. I ignored all his calls. He was a stranger now. I had no obligation to leave for him. But after a month, 2 months, with the calls incessant, I had a premonition. Maybe something happened to them. With a bit of hope, I answered the phone. What's wrong, Mike? Help me, Mike screamed in a desperate voice. Mom's in trouble. I smiled. My name is Mary, a 33-year-old housewife. I'm home. My son Henry returned home. I greeted Henry at the entrance. Welcome back, Henry. There's pudding in the fridge. You can have one. Really? Just one? Henry is in 3rd grade, but still a child at heart and clingy. The rest is for Jane to eat. Everyone gets one. Before we moved, they were all mine. I wish we never came to this house. Just as I was about to cover Henry's mouth, a shrill voice echoed from behind. Mary! You haven't finished cleaning yet. Henry, you're supposed to study when you get home, right? Hurry up. As we stood frozen, Jane clicked her tongue. Seriously, that's why I was against someone with a divorce history, and to bring such a poorly behaved child. Jane went on with her disdainful remarks towards me and Henry. I have a history of divorce and an ex-husband. Henry is the child from that marriage. I divorced when Henry was 3 years old. The reason was my ex-husband's infidelity. Since then, I've raised Henry single-handedly. I worked hard day and night for Henry's life and his future. I thought I could handle it because I was young. But then, like a taut string snapping, I collapsed. The cause was overwork. I was deeply regretful and despairing. What should I do now? Work to live? Collapse? Then work again? Will this cycle continue endlessly? That's when my current husband, Mike, appeared. I met Mike in the hospital where I was admitted. I was shopping with Henry at the hospital store when he threw a tantrum wanting candy. Then Mike showed up and said, I'll buy it for you. Which one? What candy do you want? I tried to stop him in a panic, but Mike said, just this once, and bought the candy for Henry. Mike had come to visit a friend and happened to stop by the store. I love kids. I enjoy seeing them excited and having fun. But I also find their complaining and tantrums cute. I can't help but spoil them when I see it. Mike seemed like a genuinely nice man, and Henry instantly took a liking to him. See you later. And by chance, the next time Henry came to the hospital, we ran into Mike at the store again. Mike bought candy for Henry again. As this continued, I naturally started to trust Mike. No mother would dislike a man who shows affection to her child. Then one day Henry said, Hey, become my dad. Mom and I are struggling with money. He must have thought of Mike, who always bought him candy, as a rich hero. I scolded Henry for his impolite remark, but watching Mike smile gently, I became conscious of him for the first time. A year later, I married Mike. He was about 10 years older, but his mature composure was comforting. I was surprised to learn that Mike was actually wealthy. Mike was an executive at the company his grandfather founded and a candidate for the next president. That company is one of the top manufacturers in America. A divorced woman who married into wealth. Mike's relatives, especially Jane, seem to look at me with that perspective. Today our family begins living with Jane. This started when Mike's father passed away, leading to Mike's promotion as president. Jane proposed that we support Mike together. There was another reason. Jane, I want to teach Henry various things, as he will be the one to take over the company in the future, said. When I saw the old magnificent mansion, my heart raced with the thought of living there. Come on, don't just stand there. Mary, you clean. Henry, you study. Get to it, quickly. Standing in front of clapping Jane, I felt overwhelmed by anxiety about our future life. At 4 a.m., I was in the kitchen. Last night, Jane firmly told me to prepare breakfast at this time. After finishing breakfast, I woke Jane up. Rubbing her sleepy eyes, Jane came to the kitchen. Jane, how is it? In front of the breakfast I made, Jane crossed her arms. Then she sighed. I can't believe it. You actually prepared bread for breakfast. This wasn't supposed to be in this house. You must have bought it on purpose. I peered at the irritated face of Jane. Would you have preferred something else? Of course. The main meal should be gluten-free. Gluten-free bread, scrambled eggs, and vegetable soup. That's the standard. You do know that wheat is poison to our bodies, right? Jane looked at me sharply. I'm sorry. I didn't know. You see, wheat doesn't suit our bodies. Wheat components harm our brains. You knew that, didn't you? No, I didn't know that. Young people these days just watch TV. That's why they get brainwashed easily. Read books. Otherwise, you'll become stupid. I apologized to Jane. Thank you for telling me. From now on, I'll prepare gluten-free bread for breakfast. No, you can't. Jane pointed at the breakfast. Remake it, right now. Stunned, I saw Jane smirking at me. Lucky you, there's still plenty of time before Mike and Henry wake up. Be grateful. Grateful for the time? I thought for a moment and then asked Jane. So, you mean you gave me time to remake it? That's right. I knew this would happen with a commoner and a divorced woman. Jane nodded proudly. It meant she had set the time for breakfast, anticipating I'd have to remake it. I had thought it odd to wake up so early. And the 4 portions of breakfast you prepared? Eat them yourself. Don't waste food. Jane, annoyed at my lack of immediate response, clapped her hands in front of me. Hurry up! Shrinking at Jane's shout in my ear, I thought, the wife in this house needs to support both home and employees. I'm trying to teach you how to do that. Open the fridge and start cooking. You'll remake it as many times as necessary until a proper breakfast is ready. Jane ranted in my ear. Overwhelmed by Jane's outburst, I immediately opened the fridge and took out the ingredients. Lately, I hadn't been able to have a proper conversation with Henry. When Henry comes home, he has studies with a tutor, followed by foreign language lessons. Jane, who decided on her own that Henry would inherit the company, left him no time to play with friends, eat snacks, or relax at home. I pleaded with Jane several times to give him some free time, but it was never heard. One day while making dinner, I received a message from Mike. Insider-like. I wonder if I could ask for that. Insider? Puzzled by the abrupt word, I tilted my head. Wrong message. Delete it.
It's deleted, I replied to Mike, but I decided not to delete the message for the time being.
I had some recollection of the term insider and decided to research it a bit later. Mike returned home that night in a very good mood. He briskly took me to Henry's room. Henry, how was today's test? Henry was studying with his tutor. Stopping his study, Henry took a larger than usual test paper. Looking expectantly at Mike, Henry had a dejected face. Mike took the test paper. The score was 95 points. Seeing it, Mike, without changing his calm demeanor, crumpled the test into a ball. Henry? Yes. 95 points. Well, not bad for an average person, but you are special. A man who might inherit one of America's leading companies. You understand what that means? Henry stumbled over his words. The smile disappeared from Mike's face and his eyes widened. Didn't I say it before? You have to be perfect. Anything less than 100 points is unacceptable in our family. If you can't remember something this important, you don't deserve to be here. I'm sorry. Henry trembled. I grabbed Mike's arm and pulled him out of the room. Hey, you. That's too much. Henry is your son, your family, right? Does family need qualifications? When I challenged him head on, Mike tilted his head in puzzlement. Huh? That's what family is. Each member fulfilling their role is how we protect the family legacy. Women perfect in household duties, men perfect in protecting the company. If you can't do that, you're not family, because you're no good for the family. You're just a stranger. Isn't that obvious? I was at a loss for words. That's not family. It's like treating people as tools. I can't take this anymore. I can't. Henry's scream came from the room. Rushing back, I saw Henry throwing pencils and notebooks at the tutor. I don't want to study anymore. I can't remember all this. I'm a failure. Even Dad hates me. Henry was crying and screaming. Henry! I hugged him. It's okay now, Henry. It's all going to be okay. I stroked my son's back as he continued to cry, my resolve hardening. I can't stay here anymore. I'll get a divorce. I had been preparing for the divorce in secret. Divorce would mean a return to a difficult life, working from dawn to dusk, but it couldn't be helped. I am a mother. No matter how hard it is, it's all right for my son. I reaffirmed my determination. Then, something happened to Henry. He would wake up feeling lethargic in the mornings and didn't want to go to school. I let Henry rest, thinking it was exhaustion from studying. The doctor said it might be anemia due to stress and prescribed iron supplements. However, the lethargy didn't improve after 1 or 2 weeks. I took Henry to a university hospital. After the examination, the doctor told me Henry has leukemia. The fatigue and anemia are symptoms, but the local doctors probably didn't suspect it. My mind went blank. And another thing, Henry has acute leukemia. It progresses fast, so we need to start treatment immediately. The doctor looked pained as he spoke. Progressing fast? I didn't want to think about what those words meant. I had no time for divorce preparations. I informed Jane and Mike about Henry's condition and stayed by his side. Jane looked disgusted. You know, Henry is going to die anyway, right? Prioritize housework for us, the living. That's right, Mary. That's your role. They seemed like people from a different world. I didn't care about them anymore, having decided to divorce. I packed mine and Henry's belongings and left the house. I supported Henry's hospital life wholeheartedly. But despite my efforts, Henry passed away in heaven after only 6 months. It was so sudden. Too abrupt an end. Just before he passed, Henry said in a faint voice, Mom? What, Henry? What is it? With doctors and nurses watching, Henry smiled, as if there was a bright future ahead. When I get discharged, I want to play a lot, play games with friends, and eat lots of pudding, Mom, okay? I couldn't stop my tears. Of course, Henry. Such a modest dream never came true. After Henry's death, I was in a daze, time passing by quickly. Today, I finished Henry's funeral. I'm home. Returning to the mansion alone, I smelled something burning. When I went to the garden, I found Mike, who had returned home earlier, sitting and burning something. Burning in front of him were children's toys and clothes, keepsakes of my son. What are you doing? I couldn't comprehend the scene before my eyes. Burning trash. Mike said as if it was the most natural thing. That's not trash, that's Henry's. Mike laughed. Henry, huh? To me, he's just a stranger who couldn't fulfill his role in this family. His face, illuminated by the flames, turned red. Mike had a malicious grin. Other people's stuff is trash. If you don't like it, get out. Seeing his face, I finally understood. Ah, this is his true nature. At the same time, the emotions I had dulled since losing Henry resurfaced. Anger and hatred. Unforgivable. Mike, who hurt Henry and mocked his death, and Jane, who stole precious time from Henry. I will have my revenge. Nothing matters anymore. I have nothing left to protect. I will bring those two down to hell with everything I've got. Telling me to get out of the house? That was my plan from the start. Sure, I answered with a broad smile. I divorced Mike. Mike himself handed me the divorce papers. He must have prepared them as soon as he realized Henry wouldn't conform to his expectations. We were just tools to Mike and his family. It was about 2 weeks after Henry's death. Every day I spoke to Henry's photo and steadily prepared for my revenge. Then a call came, from Mike. I ignored all his calls. He was a stranger now. I had no obligation to leave for him. But after a month, 2 months, with the incessant calls, I had a premonition. Maybe something happened to them. With a bit of hope, I answered the call. What's wrong, Mike? Help me! Mike screamed desperately. Mom's in serious trouble. I smiled, pretending to be concerned without being noticed. I asked, what's wrong? Mom's been acting so strange lately, slurred speech, unable to speak properly, so we went to the hospital, Mike said with a trembling voice. Mom had a stroke. She was treated but became bedridden. I've been taking care of her at home. I thought about using care services, but Mom doesn't want to be a burden on others. But I'm at my limit. I'm tired from work, and I have a business trip next week, so, Mike pleaded, won't you come back? Even if it was a short time, we live together. Mom said she'd be okay with Mary. The absurdity made me want to laugh. Classic Jane. She probably just wanted to exploit me. But after a moment's thought, I said, that's tough. I owe Jane a lot. Now it's my turn to return the favor. Thank you, Mary. Mike sounded so happy he might have been crying. I was looking forward to when those tears would turn to sorrow. I returned to the mansion and took care of bedridden Jane. Here's your breakfast. I prepared wheat bread. I pushed the bread into Jane's mouth. Jane opened her eyes wide, rejecting it, but she couldn't resist with her bedridden body. No, Jane, you can't be picky. Even Henry could eat bread. I forced the bread into Jane's mouth, but Jane never swallowed it, struggling with her mouth full. Tears welled up in her eyes. Stop! What's wrong, Jane? My brain! Jane tried desperately to speak with her slurred speech. Wheat harms the brain. Such conspiracy nonsense Jane seemed to truly believe. Ah, I forgot. Eating bread would further damage your brain. But it doesn't matter anymore. It's clear that Jane's end is near. I smiled. Jane glared at me resentfully. I clapped my hands loudly in front of her. Come on, swallow what's in your mouth. Don't dawdle. I shouted in Jane's ear. Startled, Jane spat out the bread. She coughed. I picked up the bread from the floor and brought the dirty bread to Jane's mouth. It's no use, Jane. You said so yourself. I pushed the bread into Jane's mouth. You can't waste food. Jane screamed. Ugh! I fed Jane bread every day, morning, noon, and night. If she spit it out, I put it back in her mouth. If she spat it out again, back in it went. This went on for hours on end. In an environment where she could receive no help, perhaps Jane lost the will to resist, and within a week she obediently swallowed the bread. Jane became utterly exhausted and now spent all day trembling in bed. She would scream whenever I appeared. A month later, Mike returned from his business trip. When I greeted him at the entrance, seeing my face, Mike smiled. Thank you, Mary. It must have been hard taking care of Mom. I smiled gently. It's fine. After all, she's the mother of the man I loved. I thought of it as the duty of an ex-wife. Mary, you finally understand. Mike's eyes welled up as he approached. I quickly avoided him and headed to the living room. Dinner's ready. Jane's sleeping right now, so let's eat together. I'm looking forward to it. There's nothing better than coming home from work to a dinner. I chuckled bitterly at our conversation, reminiscent of newlyweds. Just as we were about to eat, a sound like a woman's moan was heard. Oh, it seems Jane's awake. Mike and I headed to the room where Jane was. Seeing us, Jane opened her mouth wide and said, Mike. What's wrong, Mom? Mike leaned over Jane's bed. She's useless. Get out. Jane glared at me. Mike frowned. What are you talking about, Mom? You've been under Mary's care all this time, right? Look how clean she's kept the room. Be grateful. It's not that. I had erased all evidence of feeding Jane bread. Listen, Mary even made my dinner. She fulfilled her role admirably. But, Mom, you just lie in bed all day. The useless one is you. Jane's eyes filled with tears. Frustrated that she couldn't convey her intentions, she began to scream incoherently. The sound was ear-piercing. Shut up! Be quiet! Mike yelled, his face turning red. The two started hurling insults at each other, and I laughed behind Mike's back. I left the mansion. While they were arguing, I took my pre-packed belongings and left the house. Of course, Mike called me soon after. Mary, why did you leave? I said tearfully, because Jane told me to leave. I tried so hard to take care of her. Mom's just emotionally unstable. Please, I can't handle it anymore. I'm sorry, I'm just too tired. I love Jane so much, but to see her change like that, it's too painful. Mary. Mike seemed deeply moved by my lie. He fell silent as if in deep thought. When I've sorted out my feelings, I'll come visit. Is it okay if I keep the keys? Of course. Thank you, Mike. I hung up the phone. 6 months later, I visited Mike's mansion with a large trash bag. I entered Jane's room and rummaged through her closet. I filled the bag with Jane's favorite clothes, accessories, brand-named items, and luxury goods. Once done, I opened all the doors and shelves in the room, grabbing memorabilia of Jane and Mike, and stuffed them into the trash bag. I carried the heavy bag to the garden. I dumped the contents on the ground and lit them with a lighter from my pocket. The smell of burning filled the air as Jane's precious memories quickly turned to ash. Then I heard a sound from the entrance. Mary, are you there? Mike's exhausted voice called out. I greeted him at the entrance. Welcome back. Sorry, I let myself out early. I just felt a bit... It's okay. I'm suffering too. Who would have thought Mom would end up like this? Today was Jane's funeral. After I left the mansion, Mike had taken care of Jane, but unable to balance work and care, he eventually placed her in a facility. Jane rapidly lost weight and developed symptoms similar to depression. She didn't even try to speak when Mike visited. Jane's last moments were in the facility's bed. In the morning, the staff came to check and found that she had already passed away. The doctor said it was probably a recurrence of the stroke. I rubbed Mike's back, trying to comfort him. Let's have a coffee in the garden for a change of mood. Thank you, Mary. Mike looked at me with tearful eyes. I took his hand and led him to the garden. What's this smell? Huh? The moment the garden came into view, Mike was stunned. At the sight of Jane's belongings being burnt to ashes. A bonfire? Mary, what are you doing? Mike asked, half laughing. I told the clueless Mike, burning trash. If you look closely, you can see they're all Jane's belongings, I said matter-of-factly. Trash? What are you talking about? Those are Mom's precious memories. Why would you do this? I was surprised at Mike's disarray. Why are you getting so heated? They're just someone else's things. Someone else? Mom is family. I tilted my head at Mike's statement. You said it yourself, didn't you? Jane was useless. If she can't fulfill her role in the house, she's a stranger, right? I smiled. Someone else's stuff is trash, so I burnt them. Mike lunged at me. Are you kidding me? You can't just burn someone else's things. Then why don't you save them? Not all of it is burnt yet. Mike's eyes widened, and in shock or panic, he reached into the fire. I'm sure he was so shocked that he panicked. Trying to grab Jane's belongings, he quickly withdrew his hand from the intense heat. Damn it! Mom's memories, precious memories. Mike, with tears and snot running down his face, repeatedly thrust his hands into the fire. But all Jane's items burnt to nothing. Be careful, Mike. I extinguished the remaining fire with a bucket full of water. Looking at the pitiable remains of Jane's belongings, Mike collapsed. Why? Why would you do this? You took care of Mom. You cooked for me. Yes, all that was to gain your trust. Poor Jane. She couldn't even get her own son to believe the truth. What do you mean? Did you do something to Mom? I didn't do anything. Just took care of her. Jane was crying with joy when she ate the bread I gave her. Bread? You fed Mom bread?
That's bad for the brain, if you feed her that. Here, cool down your head. I poured the remaining water from the bucket over his head.
Mike staggered, slipped, and fell. He seemed to have twisted his ankle and groaned in pain. His figure was miserably pitiful. Such a family drama must be hard on the employees. I bet your father and grandfather in heaven are crying. Maybe it's better if the company just collapses. I threw the bucket away from Mike. My revenge isn't over yet. I left Mike and walked out of the mansion. I was watching TV at my new home. The morning news was on, and the announcer cheerfully delivered the news. Suddenly, a breaking news alert came on. Breaking news! Police are investigating suspected insider trading. Then my mobile phone rang. Hello? It was Mike. You did it, didn't you? What are you talking about? I pretended not to know, and Mike shouted in irritation. About the insider trading. The message Mike had mistakenly sent. It proved his wrongdoing. Insider trading involves someone with internal company information providing it to others for unfair profit in stock trading. A serious crime. I sold Mike's message to a magazine. Reporters thoroughly investigated the company and wrote the truth, perhaps thinking information from the president's ex-wife was credible. The scandal of a well-known company shook the public, and today the police finally acted. It's your fault. Committing a crime while running a company? That's none of your business. By the way, do you even have time to call me? Isn't your company in chaos right now? Aren't the police there? Mike's evasive response made me somewhat understand. You're running away, aren't you? Mike fell silent. That must be his answer. I sighed. You said it yourself, didn't you? The man's role is to do a perfect job to protect the company. I mocked Mike audibly. Good job. You really did a great job in the end. I sent him my sincerest congratulations and hung up the phone. I didn't forget to inform the police about the call from Mike. Mike was arrested. It turned out he had been insider trading all along to maintain relationships with business partners. Since Mike became president, the company's reputation with partners had plummeted. Amid companies terminating deals, Mike resorted to criminal acts to keep the few remaining partners. Who could have imagined such an end for a company that had lasted generations? Pathetic. That's all I could think. That night I was planning my next move. It wasn't enough. This was too meager for Henry. Henry wouldn't forgive me. Lost in these thoughts at my desk, I must have fallen asleep. I found myself in a dream. Standing in an empty space, I was suddenly hugged tightly around the waist from behind. I turned around immediately. Henry? Henry looked up at me with a gentle face. I crumbled to the ground. I'm sorry, Henry. It's because Mom remarried, thinking we could be happy as a family of 3. What a foolish dream, Henry. Henry shook his head in my arms. Mom? Henry looked at me and smiled. Thank you. At that moment, I woke up. Tears were streaming down my cheeks. Remembering Henry's face in the dream, I cried my heart out. A long time passed. In the morning, I finished getting ready and headed to the entrance. I gazed at the photo of Henry propped up there. Accepting Henry's death wasn't something I could easily do. I've heard plenty of advice about not dwelling on the past and looking forward, but none of it resonated with me. But at least I wanted to live in a way that wouldn't embarrass me in front of Henry in heaven. And when I meet Henry again, I'll tell him everything I experienced. The things Henry couldn't do, the things he wanted to do. I'll experience and share them. I'm leaving now, Henry. I left the house with a smile. The sky was clear and blue.